Most dating advice tells blokes to pack in certain habits if they want better results. But what if some of the things people slag off the most aren't actually hurting your love life? In fact, a few of them might actually be giving you the edge. Today, we're sorting the myths from the reality by looking at 4 dating habits British men often get shamed for and the 5 habits that consistently lead to stronger attraction and healthier relationships. Topic 1. Habit number 1. Being too polite gets mistaken for being weak. There's a reason British men are often associated with good manners. But in today's dating world, that reputation can turn into a bit of a double-edged sword. Loads of people assume that if a bloke is consistently polite, respectful, and patient, he must also be a pushover or lacking in confidence. That assumption spreads like wildfire on social media and in dating advice, even though it completely ignores one important truth. Being courteous and being insecure are not the same thing. A man can hold a door open, listen properly, and still be completely sure of himself. The trouble starts when people mistake calm behavior for having no backbone. The difference becomes obvious once you look past the surface. A confident bloke doesn't use manners to win people over. He uses them because they reflect his own standards. Picture 2 men on a first date. One interrupts constantly, tries to hog every conversation, and mistakes arrogance for charisma. The other listens, speaks with intention, keeps eye contact, and treats everyone around him with respect, from the woman across the table to the waiter serving the meal. Ironically, it's usually the second bloke who has the stronger self-confidence, because he doesn't feel the need to put on a show for attention. That's where a lot of men get muddled up. They hear that nice guys finish last and assume kindness itself is the problem, when really, it's people-pleasing that creates unattractive behavior. There's a world of difference between being courteous because it reflects your character and being agreeable because you're scared of letting someone down. Understanding that distinction changes the whole way a man approaches dating. But there's another habit British men often get slated for that causes even more confusion, and its effect on attraction is surprisingly different. Topic 2. Habit number 2. Taking things slow instead of rushing romance. In a culture where dating apps push you towards snap decisions and social media glorifies whirlwind romances, taking things slowly can almost seem a bit old hat. British men are often stereotyped as being more reserved in the early stages of dating, and that restraint sometimes gets written off as hesitation or a lack of interest. But moving at a steady pace isn't always a sign of uncertainty. More often than not, it's a sign that someone values building a genuine connection over chasing a quick thrill. In the long run, those two approaches lead to very different kinds of relationships. Think about how many promising connections fizzle out because everything happens too fast. A bloke meets someone, starts texting non-stop, shares every detail of his life within days, and has planned the next 5 dates before the first one's even finished. At first the intensity feels exciting, but without realizing it, he leaves hardly any room for curiosity to grow. Compare that to a man who enjoys the conversation, sticks to his own routine, and lets each date reveal something new. He isn't playing mind games or creating fake distance. He's simply letting attraction develop naturally instead of forcing it overnight. That doesn't mean taking it slow should become an excuse for emotional distance or mixed signals. You still need to show interest, make plans, and be consistent. The difference is that confidence isn't measured by speed, it's measured by intention. A relationship built one meaningful step at a time often feels stronger, because both people have had time to see each other beyond the initial buzz. And while patience is often misread, there's another British habit that sparks even more debate, one that's regularly mistaken for emotional coldness when it's actually something else entirely. Topic 3. Habit number 3. Keeping emotions under control. Few stereotypes are as tightly linked to British men as the old stiff upper lip. For generations, they've been portrayed as calm, composed, and reluctant to show strong emotions in public. These days, that trait often gets criticized, especially in dating, where being emotionally open is encouraged. Some people are quick to label emotional restraint as coldness or a lack of vulnerability, but emotional control and emotional unavailability are 2 completely different things, and mixing them up leads plenty of men to pick up habits that actually work against them. Picture a couple facing their first proper row. One bloke reacts on impulse, raises his voice, fires off emotional texts late at night, and lets frustration dictate every word. Another takes a moment to process what's happened, listens before responding, and chooses his words carefully instead of reacting on the spot. Neither man is hiding his emotions, but only one of them is actually managing them. That kind of self-control creates a sense of emotional safety, and safety is one of the least talked about yet most powerful forms of attraction. People naturally trust someone who stays steady when things get uncomfortable. The mistake plenty of men make is believing they have to spill every feeling to prove they're emotionally mature. In reality, maturity is less about bearing it all and more about regulating your emotions. A confident man knows when to speak, when to listen, and when staying quiet says more than an instant reaction ever could. He isn't pretending his emotions don't exist. He's simply refusing to let them run the show. That balance is rare, and it quietly sets him apart. But there's another habit that causes even more confusion, because it's often read as disinterest when it's actually a sign of something far more attractive. Topic 4. Habit number 4. Not constantly chasing validation. One of the biggest myths in modern dating is the belief that showering someone with attention is the best way to prove you're genuinely interested. Plenty of British men, though, are naturally more reserved when it comes to seeking approval. They don't always flood someone's phone with messages. They don't feel the need to compliment every single photo, and they rarely build their whole schedule around someone they've only just met. To some, that comes across as distant or even emotionally unavailable. But more often than not, it's simply the behavior of a man who already has a full and balanced life. There's an important difference between making someone feel valued and making someone the center of your whole identity. A bloke who's constantly checking his phone, replying within seconds every single time, changing his plans last minute, and waiting anxiously for validation often thinks he's proving his commitment. In reality, he might be sending a very different message, that his mood depends entirely on someone else's attention. Compare that to a man who enjoys the conversation, makes thoughtful plans, follows through on his word, but carries on investing in his work, friendships, fitness, and personal goals. His attention feels deliberate rather than desperate, and that difference is impossible to fake. Ironically, the men who spend the least energy trying to convince others of their worth are often seen as the most attractive. That's because confidence isn't measured by how much attention a man hands out, but by how comfortable he is without constantly fishing for something in return. Genuine interest doesn't need endless reassurance, and healthy attraction leaves room for two independent people to choose each other rather than needing each other. Once that idea clicks, the conversation shifts completely, because the next 5 habits aren't simply misunderstood, they're the behaviors that consistently create stronger attraction and healthier relationships. Before we get stuck into the 5 habits that actually work, quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying this breakdown and fancy more practical dating insights based on psychology rather than cliches, take a second to subscribe to the channel. We're currently working towards our goal of hitting 1,000 subscribers, and every new subscriber helps us keep churning out in-depth content like this. Cheers for being part of the journey. Now let's crack on with the habits that actually make a difference. Topic 5. What actually works? Number 1. Calm. Confidence beats loud confidence. There's a common belief that confidence has to be loud to be attractive. Films often portray the most desirable bloke as the one who dominates every conversation, tells the biggest stories, and always has the perfect comeback. But in real life, the kind of confidence that leaves the strongest impression is usually much quieter. It doesn't demand attention because it doesn't need constant confirmation. A man who's genuinely comfortable in his own skin rarely feels the urge to prove it, and that calm presence often stands out far more than any dramatic show of charisma. Think about the people who naturally command respect when they walk into a room. They aren't always the loudest or the funniest. More often they speak with purpose, hold relaxed eye contact, listen without cutting in, and stay composed even when the conversation gets tricky. Their confidence shows up in the small details. They don't rush their words, they don't laugh nervously after every sentence, and they don't panic when a brief silence pops up. Instead of trying to impress everyone, they focus on being properly present. Ironically, that lack of performance is exactly what makes them memorable. The good news is that this kind of confidence can be built. It starts with keeping promises to yourself, improving your posture, speaking a touch more slowly, and getting comfortable with moments of silence instead of filling every gap with nervous chatter. Reading books like The Charisma Myth by Olivia Fox-Caban or No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover can also help reshape how a man understands confidence and self-respect. Over time, these small tweaks build a presence that feels authentic rather than rehearsed. And once that inner confidence is sorted, another habit starts to emerge naturally, one that completely changes how people see a man's value in the dating world. Topic 6. What actually works? Number 2. Having standards instead of chasing everyone. One of the most attractive qualities a man can develop has nothing to do with looks, income, or perfect chat. It's having standards. Loads of men grow up believing their job is simply to be chosen, so they approach dating as if every opportunity has to be pursued. They say yes to every invite, overlook obvious mismatches, and ignore red flags because they're scared another chance might never come along. But the moment a man starts weighing up whether someone's actually the right fit for his life, not just whether he can win her approval, his whole mindset starts to shift. Picture 2 different approaches to a first date. One bloke spends the whole evening trying not to say anything that might blow his chances. He agrees with every opinion, laughs at jokes he doesn't find funny, and shapes his personality around what he thinks the other person wants to hear. The second man is warm, respectful, and genuinely interested, but he's also paying attention. Does the conversation flow naturally? Do their values line up? Is there mutual curiosity, kindness, and respect? Instead of asking, how do I get her to like me? He's asking, would we actually build a good relationship together? That subtle shift creates a completely different dynamic because it puts both people on equal footing. Having standards doesn't mean becoming fussy or treating dating like a tick box exercise. It means knowing the kind of life you want to build and recognizing that not every connection deserves a second date. Practical examples include deciding that honesty matters more than physical attraction, looking for someone who respects your time instead of constantly canceling plans, or choosing emotional maturity over short-term excitement. A man with healthy standards doesn't chase every possibility because he understands that saying no to the wrong person makes room for the right one. And once he stops fishing for validation from everyone, he naturally becomes capable of offering something even more valuable in a relationship: steady emotional stability, which is exactly where the next habit kicks in. Topic 7. What actually works? Number 3. Emotional stability is more attractive than charm. Charm can open a door, but emotional stability is what makes someone want to keep inviting you in. Loads of men spend years trying to become more entertaining, more flirty, or more impressive, believing that's what creates lasting attraction. While those qualities can certainly help at the start, they lose their punch if they're not backed up by something deeper. The men who build the healthiest relationships aren't necessarily the most charming. They're the ones whose behavior stays consistent, especially when life throws a curve. Picture two men facing the same tricky situation. A date has to cancel last minute. The first immediately assumes the worst, fires off frustrated messages, goes distant, or tries to guilt trip her. The second simply responds with understanding, gets on with his own plans, and suggests another day if she's still up for it. He doesn't ignore his feelings, but he also doesn't let disappointment call the shots. That kind of emotional steadiness says more than any words could. It tells the other person, my mood isn't controlled by every little curveball, and that's a quality people instinctively find reassuring. Emotional stability isn't about pretending problems don't exist or acting indifferent to everything. It's about building habits that stop emotions from taking the wheel. Regular exercise, decent sleep, meaningful friendships, journaling, or even reading books like Emotional Agility by Susan David can strengthen that ability over time. A man who learns to pause before reacting, communicate without having a go, and stay grounded during conflict becomes someone others naturally feel safe around. And once that foundation's in place, there's one final habit that ties everything together, a habit that quietly separates men who simply date from men who build lives that others genuinely want to be part of. Topic 8. What actually works? Number 4. A purpose outside dating. One of the most attractive things a man can have is a life that doesn't revolve around dating. That doesn't mean relationships aren't important. It means they're not his only source of meaning. Men with a clear sense of purpose approach dating from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. They've got goals they're chuffed to wake up for, friendships they genuinely value, hobbies that push them, routines that carry on whether they're single or in a relationship. Ironically, the less a man builds his entire identity around finding a partner, the more interesting he naturally becomes. It's easy to spot the difference in everyday life. One bloke cancels his workout because someone he's just met fancies grabbing a coffee. He neglects old mates, loses focus at work, and slowly drops the habits that once made him confident, all because he's worried about missing out. Another man handles the same situation completely differently. He's happy to make time for someone he's interested in, but not at the expense of everything else he's worked hard to build. If he's already got plans with mates, he's comfortable suggesting another evening. If he's committed to a fitness goal or an important project, he sees it through instead of dropping everything the second he gets some attention. His priorities stay steady, and that consistency sends a powerful message. His life already has direction. Building that kind of purpose doesn't require becoming a millionaire or climbing Mount Everest. It starts with finding something worth investing in every day. It could be mastering a skill, launching a business, moving up in your career, learning a language, training for a marathon, volunteering in the community, or simply becoming healthier than you were last year. Books like Atomic Habits by James Clear or So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport offer practical ways to build a life driven by progress rather than validation. When a man is genuinely fulfilled by the path he's on, relationships become an addition to his life instead of its foundation, and that naturally leads to the final habit, one that lets him create authentic connections without trying to be someone he's not.